Welcome to the Explainer. You know, when you're up against the reigning world champions, every single pass, every run, and literally every shift in your defensive shape absolutely matters. Today, we're looking at a total masterclass in defensive resilience. We're going to break down exactly how England neutralized an incredibly dominant Spanish side in a super high-stakes matchup to grind out a massive 1-0 victory. Okay, let's dive into this.
Here is a quick roadmap for today's Explainer. First up, the early breakthrough. Then we'll look at Spain's passing rhythm, followed by the core of it all, England's defensive structure. We'll wrap up with Hampton's crucial saves, and finally, holding the line.
To really appreciate the tactical mountain England had to climb here, you have to consider Spain's pedigree. I mean, they didn't just bring any squad. They fielded 8 of the players who started the Euros final. Plus, the Spanish side featured 8 Barcelona players. Think about that for a second. Their chemistry, that famous possession-heavy style, the innate understanding of each other's movements, it was already at a world-class club-level standard. The stakes were incredibly high, and for England, the margin for error was practically zero.
Number 1. The early breakthrough. Game plans are great, right? But they so often get totally thrown out the window when an early goal shifts the entire tactical landscape. 3. Just 3 minutes. That's how long it took for England to completely break the deadlock and set the tone for the entire match. By scoring so early, England immediately forced Spain into a spot where they had to chase the game, and that allowed the Lionesses to confidently drop into the defensive structure we'll be analyzing in a bit. But how exactly did they get that crucial goal? Well, it all came from a set piece. Brilliantly executed. It kicked off with an Alex Greenwood corner delivery that caused absolute confusion in the box. Everyone jumped up for it, but nobody made a solid connection. The ball drops and Alessia Russo manages this incredibly tight, super clever flick right on the floor. Amidst all that chaos, Lauren Hemp was the absolute first to react. She pulls off this fantastic, acrobatic finish to clear it right into the net. Spain just couldn't do enough on the line to keep it out.
Moving on to number 2. Spain's passing rhythm.
Once they went down a goal, Spain didn't panic. Not at all. They leaned right into their identity. And this brilliantly illustrates the dynamic of the match for the next 80-plus minutes. Spain's build-up was incredibly patient. It actually took them about 10 minutes to truly find their passing rhythm. But man, once they did, they were moving the ball around the final third with literally every single one of their 10 outfield players. Yet despite all that overwhelming possession, the resulting frustration for the Spanish side was palpable. You could feel it. They were largely unable to penetrate the final third and force early shots, which led to some slightly rash attempts that you just wouldn't normally expect from them.
The match commentary actually hit the nail on the head here. They noted that Spain, quote, know they're comfortable on the ball, moving it around, just waiting for England to make an error. That's their attacking philosophy in a nutshell, pure patience. They don't force it because they completely trust that eventually the opponent's defensive structure is going to crack, an error will be made, and a gap will open up. But as we're about to see, England absolutely refused to make that error.
Number 3. England's defensive structure.
So this brings us to the absolute core focus of today's Explainer, England's defensive masterclass. Look, this wasn't just about parking the bus, okay? It was about highly coordinated tactical discipline that actively neutralized the world champions. So the crucial point is the sheer discipline of England's defensive formation. The commentary noted their, quote, structure with their formation, the gaps they're keeping closed. They dropped into a highly compact 4-5-1 low block, constantly communicating, shifting as a single unified unit to completely choke off Spain's passing lanes. They knew perfectly well Spain wanted to play intricate football through the middle and exploit those half spaces. So what did England do? They tightly packed those central areas, forcing Spain out into less dangerous, wider positions.
Now, what's really interesting here is how that structural discipline resulted in unbelievable congestion. The commentary pointed out that, quote, England's 18-yard box is just so congested there's barely any space. It wasn't just a tight midfield. That 18-yard box was absolutely flooded with defenders. There was barely an inch of space for Spanish attackers to breathe, let alone operate. When players like Bamir tried to work their brilliant footwork into central positions, boom, they were immediately swarmed, totally unable to keep their shots low or dangerous enough to actually trouble the keeper.
But listen, defending like a 4-5-1 brick wall means absorbing relentless, multi-directional pressure. And Spain, they threw everything at them. You had Vicky Lopez being a constant threat, firing a shot that clipped the outside of the post and later missing a connection by literal millimeters at the back post. Then you've got Carmona, the left back, making these overlapping runs deep into the box and coming incredibly close to scoring herself. And of course, the constant aerial threat of Paredes on every single set piece. England's defense had to be perfectly attuned to all these different types of danger, all at the exact same time.
Sometimes, though, structural discipline just isn't quite enough, and you have to rely on sheer grit and tactical pragmatism. Case in point, when Jordi Parlowelu used her fresh legs to get the other side of Lucy Bronze and launch a really dangerous run, Bronze didn't hesitate for a second. She took the player down with a pull of the shirt. It was a calculated, cynical foul. Bronze knew exactly what she was doing. She sacrificed a foul to stop a highly dangerous break. It's a prime example of the dark arts of defending, and honestly, sometimes they're absolutely necessary to hold a clean sheet against a world-class team.
Number 4. Hampton's crucial saves.
Of course, no defensive structure is completely impenetrable, right? When the line actually is breached, you need a goalkeeper playing at the absolute top of their game. Hannah Hampton's performance was such a fascinating progression to watch. Early on, she actually got a bit lucky. She tried to make a pass, an outstretched leg led to a loose ball that Vicky Lopez lashed onto, but Hampton somehow managed the interception. Then, as the match progressed into the middle stages, she really settled in. She showed incredibly strong hands to deal with dangerous pullbacks from the wide channels, but her crowning moment, that came late in the match.
After a brilliant delivery found Amayor with immense time and space right in the box, the Spanish attacker thought she had undoubtedly scored. But Hampton was right there. She executed a brilliant reflex save from point-blank range, diving sharply to her right to deny what looked like a surefire equalizer. This was the absolute climax of Spain's offensive push, and Hampton just stood tall.
Number 5. Holding the line. Let's move to the end of the match and see how this builds, because that point-blank save really set the stage for a chaotic, high-tension finale. This is where tactics often give way to pure survival instincts. Let's recount those frantic 4 minutes of stoppage time. Spain was throwing literally everything forward. Step 1 for England, surviving incredibly dangerous flat corners whipped right into the mixer. Step 2, dealing with the aftermath, relying on players like Keira Walsh to step up and clear awkward, low balls out of danger. And step 3 was just escaping these heart-stopping moments where Spanish players were creeping in completely unmarked at the back post, only to have the ball barely sail over their heads.
As the commentary perfectly summed it up, quote, chaos in the midfield again. In those dying minutes, England wasn't relying on pristine passing anymore. They were in pure, unadulterated survival mode. Players like Alex Greenwood were making scrambled clearances without even knowing much about it. It was all about sheer willpower, throwing bodies on the line, and doing whatever it took to hear that final whistle.
And you know what? They did it. England held on to win 1-0. Which leaves us with this final provocative question. Is this highly disciplined, deeply congested 4-5-1 defending the absolute ultimate blueprint for neutralizing a possession-dominant world champion? When a team wants to just pass you to death, is dropping into a low block and closing every single half space the only real way to survive? It definitely worked for England this time, and it gave us an absolutely incredible tactical clash to analyze. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep your eyes peeled for how these tactics evolve in their next matchup.